Alright guys, welcome to the show. I hope you sat there, either fucking scantily clad or dressed in your World Around You branded clothing. If you're not, go to worldaroundyou.com, order yourself a t-shirt, listen to these shows, and then come back to these shows when you've got your t-shirt and listen to the show in your t-shirt. Anyway, I'll let you crack on with the show. Alright guys, I'm the World Around You, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. Now, some people say that they've got super strength. Some think that some of them have got special powers. A lot of people say that they all look a certain way. And I've heard some people and all that want to sort of deny their existence or get rid of them, And a lot of time, they're taken off their families at birth, and according to the parents, it's mostly at the hands of their own government. Now, some people have what's called a special interest in so-called, quote, special children, and will do whatever they can to find them, to photograph them, to film them and interact with them. Some people believe that these children are the next step in human evolution, whereas some people might say that the special children are a whole new species unto themselves and shouldn't be allowed to procreate in case there's too many of them and they begin to outpower or outnumber us. But what with their altered strength and ability to see things that we can't see. But a lot of special children seem to look different from birth. Maybe their skin's a bit darker or has a bluish hue. Maybe there are parts of their bodies that are a different shape or formed differently. But they're still at least part human. Obviously not entirely human, as there is something else mixed in there. That's what makes them so special. But there are many different types of special children, and it probably isn't fair to use the umbrella term of special children, but just for the point of making this simpler to understand, we'll probably refer to them as the special kids, and I'm hoping that this week I can help explain just where they might have come from. But let's have a song. This is Sarface with Good Guys, Bad Guys. So, the first breed of special child we're going to look into are known as the Indigo Children, and their superpowers include being able to read auras, communicating with the gods and goddesses, angels and archangels, and the ability to do stuff with a person's chakras. Now, I'm not overly sure what a chakra is. All I know about a chakra is from teachings by Ike, where he says that these invisible lizards can grab onto our spines and necks by our chakras and basically use us as puppets. So I don't know if the Indigo Children are using people as puppets or not, but either way though, these things, they're all difficult to measure superpowers. I mean, that is until you manage to separate them all into different rooms and segregate them and ask each of them to read the aura of a person and then cycle more people through those rooms like a really fucked up kind of speed dating night where grown men and women bear their emotional all to a child alone in a locked room. As cameras, record through two-way mirrors and people observe through a separate two-way glass. But what's interesting though is that in one of the videos that I watched about Indigo Children, not where children are filmed through two-way glass, was where separate people described one bloke's aura as the same colour, which did make me wonder if there's a more common aura that is prevalent in people, and that's why they said the same colour. Because, one of them doesn't want to be outed as a fraud, or neither of them want to be outed as a fraud, so they say the most obvious one, say 95% of the population of Earth have an orange aura, then it's safe to say, oh, you've got an orange aura. Whereas if it's a whole spectrum of colours, and even, colours that, if these people can see auras, right, and that means that they can see things we can't see. Why can't they see colours we can't see? So then when they're describing this colour, saying, this colour looks blog, and you're like, oh, I've got a blog aura, but we don't know what blog is. Like, obviously, blog is somewhere between yellow and purple for those of you that aren't in the know, but we can't see that. Whereas these kids might be able to see that. So how do we know when they're saying orange, they're seeing what they think is orange, but to us that could be yellow. So we don't even know if they're telling the truth in that regard because they see things differently anyway. But I don't mean like that. I mean, what if they were just lying, then, or if one of them's lying, say one of them can actually see because 95% of people, just for argument's sake, do have an orange aura, then that means that liars and frauds could come along and be like, well, if 95% of the people have an orange aura, then I can say that most people have an orange aura, and then sort of every fucking 400th customer say, oh, you've got a purple one, that's really uncommon, that. You should buy these crystals off worldaroundyou.com. They're really good for this. They'll help you change your aura colour if that's what auras do. But what if they were actually telling the truth, though, and they could see this fella's orange glow? Like, one bloke even used a camera to be able to take a photograph of it, and that was orange as well. So that there must have been some truth to it. But that guy did also ask the guy, what's your favourite colour, by the way? And I think the guy said orange, and then he took a picture of him on what looked like an old, out-of-date, possibly broken camera, and then the guy had all orange around him. So that guy might have been a fraud, he might not have been an actual Indigo child, though. Now, you might be wondering where these powers stem from and all, and according to the parents and to the children and young millennials themselves, it's because they're able to operate on a different vibrational frequency or a different emotional frequency to other people, allowing them to interact with things that regular people can't even fathom. Now, some psychologists, though, who regard themselves as scientists, seem to believe that these people are simply exhibiting untreated ADD and ADHD. But now, I've known a lot of ADHD people, innit? A lot of my friends through my life have had ADHD for some weird reason, and we seem to get on with each other quite well. I don't know why. But none of them have ever spoken to me about seeing gods or angels or auras or out like that. None of them. So to me, it seems like scientists are trying their hardest to explain away something that the masses stay oblivious to it. Because they've said that, they've just got ADHD, when in actuality they're actually Indigo children who are seeing auras and that. But because they may have some things that are similar to ADHD, in the same way that cancer might not always be cancer. Cancer could be something that they don't know what it is, but the doctor doesn't want to say, I don't know what it is that's wrong with you. But the thing is, acts like cancer, but when they test it, it's not cancer, but it's going to treat your body like it's cancer, so they just go, it's cancer. In that same way, that's might be what they're doing with kids that they think have got ADHD, but actually they're Indigo children. Just on a hunch, just as a guess. Now, that's not grounded in any scientific research or anything. That's my idea of what they might be doing to try and explain it away, to stop people thinking that these other types of humans exist, And why would that be? Well, what if it's to try and attack these new creatures, these advanced humans? The very thing, Indigo children, right, and special children could be the reason why we have the uncanny valley affecting humans, right? We've evolved to be able to notice vampires and stuff amongst us, and shape-shifting aliens when they first came here because they weren't quite good enough at turning into what looked like humans. But now they've gotten really good at it. So now we have to use science, or so quote-unquote science, people with books basically and a lot of time on their hands, in order to be able to convince people that these things don't exist. And the people with these books probably are the vampires and the monsters and stuff. But now in like a weird sort of double bluff, instead of them grouping together and working against the humans, or even grouping together and working alongside humans like either side of the mutant wars in X-Men, what if it's more important to keep these people limited, segregated, relegated to the realms of obscurity? They're often deemed like anti-school, anti-establishment, anti-social, but that seems to be because school and the establishment is made to attack these people and wholly these people. You could look at school in that way. School is literally just made to destroy what these scientists are calling ADHD people and ADD people, but what they call themselves as Indigo children. School seems purposely made to break those people down, to ruin them. Now, what if those people are the advanced humans, but there's a group of people who aren't the advanced race of Indigo, let's call it, the purple kids, the lilac lads? What if they're not a part of that group and they're like, well, we can't let them rise up? So they make school in the way that it is to try and break them down, and it might work across the whole, but now people are starting to be, no, I've not got ADD, I'm an Indigo child, me. And it's just as a thought, And, I mean, if you wanted to look at the school an education system in that way, then it seems like it is made to completely destroy the Indigo Children. It's not anything else. It doesn't really teach you anything. You learn some stuff early on, like how to... Because you could argue, if you really wanted to argue, that schools were just made to destroy Indigo Children, right? You could argue that everything they teach you early on in school, like maths and English and how to, or maybe Spanish if you live in Spain or something, Spanish and maths, or, whatever native language, whatever language you're listening to this in, after the Greys have used the perception filters to filter it through your brain so that you can hear it in your mother tongue. Because I'm not actually speaking Spanish, which will blow your mind, but that's just going to sound like I'm not. If you are hearing this in Spanish, you're not going to hear me saying, I'm not saying this in Spanish. You're going to hear me saying, I'm not saying this in English. Just in the same sense as the English people, when they're hearing this, as hearing me say, I'm not saying this in Spanish. Do you know what I mean? You've got to be aware of these things, innit? But you could argue that the things being taught in school, like maths and your native tongue, they're only teaching that to little kids so that they can then use that as a system of indoctrination, so that they can use the written language that they've taught them to be able to teach them other stuff out of books that they've written in that language. Now I'm putting it to you that we may not even need that language. If Indigo Children truly are the future, as many songs may have suggested, then possibly they're able to get all of that information as some form of system of transference and just be able to fucking hum it at each other or something. I've not gone into masses of detail here about how they communicate and stuff. They seem to actually just communicate like regular children, just with a little bit more energy and a bit more oomph about them. But what if it's not just schools that have been made to destroy the Indigo Children? What if it's the entire world as we know it, though? Like the whole world. Like, what if these special children, right, are actually huge in number and not as rare as once believed, right? A lot of the parents of these Indigo Children as well seem to claim that high sugar foods seem to help their children to blend into society and help them along and to lead regular lives. And to be fair, right, a lot of these children I've seen were in America, and a lot of the sugar in America, as far as I'm aware, comes from cornstarch or corn syrup. And we know who gave the Americans corn, don't we? Fucking go on. I'll let you say it along, and if you're playing Parallax's World Around You's bingo, it should be on there. It's Quetzalcoatl, mate. The ancient god of the Americas. And he gave the knowledge of agriculture, that came from him and all. The serpent god, if you want to call him that. So what if the reason why corn was given by this alien is because it would be able to fuel the future generations of half serpent, half human children? This might seem like I'm about to rattle off about reptilians again, and I'm going to try and stay away from that because we keep going into the reptilians every week at the minute, and I'm trying to get away. But in actuality, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the Greys instead. Now, these serpent beings are also called the Chitahari, which are often associated with the Greys, the extra-dimensional entities that these very children claim to be in communication with, the angels. So, what if these Indigo Children who are talking to angels, taking part in communication with the angels, only exist because the Greys, or the Archons, as they might like to be known, maybe they just like to play with the food. Because these kids have an ability which allows them to tap into other people's emotions, and that could make them very emotional and all, meaning they're a richer food source for these creatures. But in another way, they could be very useful to the so-called angels, gods or goddesses, Maybe they're the bloodhounds of the Greys, like in the same way that a posh guy will use a couple dogs to be able to sniff out a fox in a woods. When they go down to the woods on the back of an horse with a fucking shotgun and a fucking brick on a rope, and they start trying to bash foxes over the heads, and or the same way that maybe a Scottish person, I think, is it the Scots that go badger baiting a lot still? It might not be, but whoever goes badger baiting, in the same way that when you go badger baiting, you use a dog to maybe sniff out a track for a badger and that, and you're like, right, there we go, that's where the badger is. They may be just using these emotional children like that as well to sniff out certain auras, certain emotional frequencies. A lot of the Indigo Children are creatives and artists too, and art, right? apparently is all about getting a reaction out of people. So maybe they're also like the bush beaters and the bloodhounds bred into one, like fucking werewolf children, mate. Metaphorical werewolves, metaphorical dogmen, where these kids have been bred to be half bloodhound, half young posh child with a stick, right? Bred together, but only metaphorically though, only metaphorically bred together, because in actuality they're actually half grey, half human, more than likely. Maybe at a push half mantid, half human, but metaphorically they're a dogman, they're half dog, half posh person. And so that they can smell the auras of these people, point them out, and maybe even bring them all to a room and then cause them all to rile up a little bit, so these invisible monsters can just sort of slurp out all the emotional goodness and drain these peoples of their life energies and that, you know. Making them, right, that makes them the perfect hunting tools for these creatures that feed off human emotion. They're able to sniff out the sensitive people and also provoke them into reacting in a way that appeases the would-be angels that I guess would now sound more like demons, but realistically, you know, in reality, like, what's the difference between the two, you know? Maybe, right, maybe these creatures are growing a bit out of hand though, and producing too many of these indigo children per capita, meaning there's huge packs of bloodhounds and less to actually hunt. Maybe that's why they're trying to make government officials cut down on sugar and making sugar more expensive, a means of making these people that are prone to strong emotional powers experience them more. Maybe Quetzalcoatl was like Mufasa from The Lion King, in the sense that he was a good leader and looked after his plane of existence whilst also eating from it and that. You know, he ate the zebras and that, but he also looked after them. Whereas the new ethereal leader that we've got above us at the minute is more like Scar, who just wants to kill and eat everything and isn't a fair leader at all. And if you want to hear more on that, listen to my Lion King episode. But it would be difficult to work out who the new leader of these ethereal entities actually is, though, because they don't seem to present themselves. We can't physically see them or find them or know who they are or even be 100% sure they exist, which adds to the theory, right, that they must be some form of shadowy creature. Now, some of the evil psychologists that are obviously on the payroll from these shadowy creatures, after attending their schooling systems and falling down the indoctrinational rabbit hole that seem to claim that they're leaving these children, these indigo children, and that means that, you know, they've not given them, in the psychologist's eyes, the correct care, you know, and categorization. Now, apparently that creates narcissists, according to these, which is just another pigeonhole term possibly made by these evil psychologists, you know. But the indigo children aren't the ones that are lording it over people. Indigo children on the whole seem to really want to help people, whereas psychologists want to categorize and belittle people just because they've got a collection of letters that get written down after their ex-husband's surname, whereas the letters they want these children to have written after their names will be just fucking separated with a comma instead. Not all the psychologists, though, not all of them seem to believe this. There was at least one that I found that seemed to believe in the indigo children, and her name, right? Her name was Nancy, right? But then that kind of makes me think of Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy was always after Nancy, right? Always trying to attack her. Freddy was a demon in the end, and a creature that resided in the other dimension that grew stronger the more he was believed in. And Nancy always knew he existed, but Freddy didn't like that. Now, you could imagine that Freddy is the extra-dimensional entities that we discuss regularly on this show, whilst the dream state is the belief in mainstream science and history. The indoctrination, and Nancy is the person who's working to try and break the indoctrination. So of course Freddy's going to try and kill her, or at least try and make her stay in the dream world, the world of science. Let's have a song. This is Smart Went Crazy by Atmosphere. Just a minute, guys. I just wanted a little calm advert for you, a little calmer advert. And if you're like me, a pseudo-intellectual, what you might enjoy are my books. You've got Uneducated Guesses, where I found a load of big words I don't know the meaning to, and then tried to work out what they mean by breaking down the syllables and drew an illustration for each one. You've got How to Date an Antique Table, A Lover's Guide, which is a book that will tell you how to get your end away with an antique table, complete with how to find an antique table, where to take an antique table on a date, like you could take it dogging, you could take it to the cinema, you could take it for a picnic, and some chat-up lines as well, like, I know I'm drunk, but you look absolutely canted. And even then, you got some pictures in the back of some of my taxidermy and that as well. And you've got my third book, More You Know, which is a book of very well-researched fake facts. Just a book of lies, basically. And some of them were suggested, as in topic-wise, were suggested by some of the people from TikTok. So you might, even if you took part in that, you might even have your username on the first couple pages of that book. Anyway, if you, like I say, if you're enjoying these, you might like the books. And you can get access to the books through Patreon or through my website. Or fucking let you crack on with the show, guys. So, Indigo Children, right, they're believed to be humans, a sort of improved human. But what about people with more physical superpower, like that Chinese lad that could see in the dark? Now, according to his headmaster at school, he used to squint in the sun, which the headmaster thought was very unusual, which might be a trait of the Chinese that I wasn't aware of. Maybe they don't usually squint in strong sunlight, I'm not too sure, but that got the head teacher curious, so he started talking to some of the other little boys that hung around with this kid, and found out that the Chinese lad could actually see in the dark. Now, he also had bright blue eyes, which can often be a sign of aliens, specifically Nordics or tall whites. Now, this little lad stood out as well, because no one else in his class was Chinese with blue eyes. In fact, I think everyone in his class was Chinese, and none of them had blue eyes apart from him. So, they did a few tests on him. They presented him things in a locked, dark room. But the little boy could see it, and the headmaster was quickly moved on to another school, like Priests in Ireland, and then they started doing actual tests on him with playing cards, because that way the sound of the zipper couldn't give it away to the little lad, you know. And it turned out that boy could see perfectly in the dark as well. He was said to have the eyes of a cat, which one might assume would be a form of medicine or something, but they meant physically his eyes, or maybe metaphorically, not physically. His eyes would shine back like a cat in the headbeam of a car that's just about to flatten it in a road. Now, I don't have any cat's eyes, but I do have some chicken eyes in robots if anyone's interested, and that's on worldaroundyou.com. Along with other balls like testicles in my bollock boys, little pairs of mouse testicles in there. I have done some other stuff with eyes as well, but this isn't about that. But cat's eyes though are weird though, innit? Because there's been a lot of money spent on producing them and transporting them and putting them into the roads, obviously over miles. I mean, maybe it saves on the amount of tarmac being used, but I've never really understood why they don't just mix glow-in-the-dark pigments and reflective pigments into the lines on motorways. At least the lines, you know, separating the driving lanes. I understand having the red reflectors on the roads at the edge and maybe at the centre division. But in the middle and between the lanes, it just seems wasteful. I think what we should do is dig them all out of the motorways and replace them with fluorescent and iridescent tarmac, because that way there's nothing that can break in the future, because surely a spring only has a certain amount of times it can be pressed down before it breaks. And then what happens then? What happens when all the cat's eyes all break on one day? They all break at the same time, and what forced cars and lorries to roll over on the motorway? It's just a fucking accident waiting to happen. Leaving the motorway behind though, because we're not really talking about roads this week. We're gonna discuss the next breed of special child, and it's actually not even real. They're star children, right? And we might get into them later, because star children, as far as I'm aware, are real. But this example of a star, the star children, the star child, this isn't actually real. We'll get into it, but we're going to discuss the Star Child skull, right? Which was a skull that got dug up sometime around 1930 in a place called Mexico. And for whatever reason, people didn't then mess with it until 1999, which is weird, isn't it? Now, it was a skull that was thought to be from an alien. You know, it was discovered by a couple who we don't know the names of. Not because of my negligence to research this week, you know. It's not my fault this week. It's not because I couldn't be asked. It's because we don't know the name of the couple that found it. But if you imagine like a pug skull or a bulldog skull made into a human skull, you kind of get the idea of what it would look like a bulbous top half with a much smaller jaw. If you imagine the damage a regular skull does, ripping a woman open as they give birth, then this one tore the woman from arsehole to belly button, just to try and give you a bit of a mental image of what this head would have looked like. Now, the skull was apparently real, but it's been deemed a hoax by pretty much everyone. Even ufologists have said it's a hoax. They've said it's not real because it was actually the skull of a human child with, I think it was called hydrofacialis. I've got it written down here, but I don't think I've written it. I don't think I've spelt it right. Hydrofacialis. Look up Star Child skull, and then you'll be able to see what the child had. It was something along those lines. I'm not overly sure what that is, but because it's irrelevant to the investigation that we're taking part in here, because it's a person and it's not an alien. So it's just a human. That's just a regular person who was born a bit different. That's not the same as a Star Child. It's not the same as an Indigo Child. They're human hybrids. This wasn't a human hybrid, this was just a human. What's interesting, though, is that this kid's skull wasn't messed with until 1999, and it wasn't properly publicised either until about 2003. And if you're into your ufology, that time period's quite significant, because late September, early October of 2001 was supposed to be a sort of disclosure about the different species of aliens, but someone decided to blow up the World Trade Center so that the event couldn't go ahead, and it made it so that the people involved couldn't travel to the event at all, potentially, and that event couldn't really go ahead because the Western world, or at least America, was on high alert. Now, that event supposedly got pushed back a couple times, till eventually it was pushed back to 2003. But this just gave Stephen Greer more time to research things and fund things, except it now became increasingly difficult to fund the necessary scientific experiments, because this seems to be where science got infested with scientists rather than actual scientists, people that wanted to further a doctrine rather than actually investigate things, They try to tell us that a scientist is a smart person, innit? And then in the same breath, they try and tell us that a scientist wouldn't accept money to test the DNA of discovered creatures in the remains because it might affect their standing in the scientific community. But if a scientist was so sure that the remains would just be human, then that means surely they would accept the fucking massive amount of money that they'd be getting paid so that they could then fund what it is they wanted to discover or create. Be it a redunkable digestive that you can dunk twice, maybe, or something a bit more sinister like a disease that only affects blind children. Either way, it would be their money, to do with as they please. Maybe they don't want to affect the blind children. Maybe they don't want to spread a disease that only affects blind children. Maybe they just maybe they wanted to put something in the water in Canada that made every deaf girl limp. Who knows? But they could have done that. They could have made the money to work towards their goals. But they didn't. We're being told that they didn't know. They didn't want to do that. Instead, they claim they don't want to be involved in trying to prove or disprove the existence of another species of humanoid creature. And why might that be, mate? I put it to you, dear listener, that it's because they already know the answer. Because it's written down in what we're taught, textbooks, but that's only what they are to an outsider like you and me. In actuality, those books are nothing but scripted answers and responses. These scientists would probably rather spend their time developing new ways to get cancer into people, or devising new psychometric questionnaires so they can make up new categorizations so that everyone's still just a human with ADD, a human with bipolar, a human with 3 arms, a human with depression, a human with PTSD, a human with the ability to see in the dark, but nevertheless still just a human, not a new creature that's since evolved from a human. Now, I say all that because it seems like the Star Child skull was sat on by the media and corporate elites until someone decided to go public with another discovery. The discovery of a 6-inch tall humanoid that was discovered mummified out the back of a church. Now, what we know about this is that it died at about 6.5 years old, thanks to a person who was interested in actually finding out the truth, a scientist rather than a scientist. Another person who was interested in finding out if it was real discovered that it contained some human DNA, but there was something else present, meaning that this was the first documented evidence, at least public evidence, of some form of human hybrid. and it was mummified as well, so it's got to have been there for a while, meaning that now they might have been able to make them live a lot longer than 6.5 years. Now let's consider that a lot of churches were built ages ago. Now that gives loads of time to improve on the formula, especially for something with the capabilities of producing completely new creatures. Now they obviously already had some form of advanced science compared to us because they could do that, so who's to say they wouldn't be able to fine-tune it in the 600 years that we've been building churches for, at least. But this discovery was overshadowed by the whole Star Child skull at the time, and all the uproar it caused because it was a hoax seemed to just kind of turn people and the public off the idea of aliens and alien-human hybrids, making it even harder for people to accept Stephen Greer's work as genuine. And let's have a song. This is Consequences by Shotty Horror. Let's have another song. This is Royster 59 with Blow That. If you're struggling for like a Christmas gift or something for someone and you're thinking to yourself, I think a pair of mouse testicles or a love heart full of mouse intestines might be a bit strong for them. And whether it's for Christmas, birthdays, a late Valentine's Day gift, Mother's Day, or just, to show someone that you actually think about them. What about a shirt, mate? Like, as I'm recording this, I'm sat here in my shirt, which is a blue tie-dye shirt with a dead fox's head on it, wearing a safety helmet, a high-vis jacket with a fag in its mouth, chuffing on a fag, so that's an idea for you, 25 quid. There's rat people on shirts, there's rat people on canvases as well, some of my favourite rat people I've made so far. One of them shagging a Barbie doll, if you're into that, or you think your friends would be into that. They're $19.99, or you get them a bit cheaper if you've joined the Patreon and you use the discount code on the Patreon. There's other shirts though as well. There's a Get Your Rat Out shirt as well. There's all sorts, mate, all sorts of shirts and stuff now. Fucking rabbit toasters and that as well, mate. Even rabbit toasters on a mug. Go and fucking have a look, mate, but, fucking finish the episode and that first. Or have a look whilst you're listening to the episode, fucking double down on your world around you intake. Fucking, I'll let you crack on with the show though. Now, I know that some of yous might be wondering why I brought up an example of something that the evidence of it went against it. A suggestion of something that wasn't true and something that was. And it's because I thought it would lead kind of nicely onto this next guy who I read about in the paper. A bloke called Stan Romanek. He is a convicted paedophile and self-confessed alien abductee. According to Stan, he's been abducted loads of times by aliens, which has led to him fathering at least 9 children off-world in a spaceship with another human woman. Now, it does seem similar to other cases of alien interactions where the children grow up very quickly compared to us, but it kind of also seems similar to stories of incubi and succubi, which are demons. I can never remember which is in which the incubi and which the succubi are, but one of them will take the shape or possess a man or a woman and force them to shag the demon or shag someone, and then they'll suck the egg or the fertilised egg out of there and place it into what we would now deem an alien-human hybrid, but what they used to say in medieval times was a demon, or it's to do with the Fae, or, they've just had different names throughout the ages, but the same story's there. Now, the children are a product of what is referred to as him, with not like a capital H or all like that. I'm not saying he's God. I mean, they refer to him as the Star Seed, capital S. Ironically, the double S, capital S, which if you want to make links between the Nazis and aliens, then, there may be some there. But let's stay away from that and let's just talk about a pedo at fucking, 1:15 in the afternoon. It's I mean, I'm hoping that's a good little time check for you now. It's currently 1:42. 12:42. But the nice thing is about these kids is that they keep in touch. He isn't able to contact them directly, and now that's not because he's a convicted paedophile and he's been put on the register that stops him from having anything to do with the kids. The kids are able to contact him. He's not banned from. It's mostly because they use a house phone to get in touch with him, and because they're so far away, it makes the line a little bit scratchy and difficult to hear. And occasionally as well, they'll start third wheeling some of his phone calls. Now they appear to have left some voicemails as well. But some people have claimed that he's faked this audio evidence after his appearance on George Norrie's Coast to Coast calling show. People started saying he faked it because he said it would take, I think he said it would cost something like 70 grand to be able to fake these calls, and someone worked out you could probably do it for $90 all in all with you know, the available tech at the time. Now this news story came out earlier this year, but we're talking about, I think, 10 years ago or so, maybe a bit longer ago, I can't quite remember. Now, his video and photographic evidence, though, hasn't left people in doubt. So, people are in doubt, but they see his videos, they see his pictures, and that doesn't make them go, probably not real. But his hybridised children aren't the only children he had photographs of, at least according to the newspaper article I was reading, because according to the story I read, he was in possession of a bit of kiddie porn, which he claims was put there by US officials to try and frame him and stop him from speaking out about being a starseed. And his wife also seems to believe this as well, at least publicly according to the paper. She also allowed for Stan and the believed mother of these hybridised children to meet up and spend some time alone. But I believe this is just a newspaper trying to spice up a story a bit, trying to get people interested in a story. You know, they've thrown in aliens, that'll get people looking. People love the story about a pedo. People love a bit of a forbidden romance between two alien abductees that were forced to procreate. And people love a bit of drama with the wife not being into it. But the newspaper's trying to make out that the wife allowed it, but wasn't overly keen, but allowed it anyway, and she was eventually fine with it. Now, I think there would be a lot to talk about with a woman that a group of aliens have forced you to shag. You know, you've got to sit down and have a cup of tea with her, haven't you? You've got to be like, I do apologise, love. You know, I would have put your needs above my own because that makes the sex more enjoyable. But the guy with the massive eyes, green skin, the thing that looked like a massive praying mantis in a spacesuit, was kind of putting me off, and this grey thing with 3 long fingers was just cupping my testicles, smashing me into you, and I do apologise, because, you know, that's not really the rhythm I would go for. There's a lot to say, and you don't want to say that in front of your wife. You don't want to have to sit down with a woman that you've only ever met because you've been forced to shag her because of aliens, and have to explain to her why you shagged her, and what that experience was like for you. You don't want to put your wife through that. So I don't think it does spice up the story, but I believe maybe the newspaper was trying to spice up the story, you know. And he obviously had a very loving wife, it seems, from what I've read. Now, this suggests to me that the old, let's call it the he's a pedo card, gets used a lot by officials in order to turn the public against someone. It's a hard thing to forget in the eyes of the public, innit? It's the eyes of the public, you know, you can get, you know, people reading the newspaper and, oh, so-and-so shagged his brother's wife, oh, so-and-so robbed a car, oh, so-and-so's addicted to cocaine. People will be like, oh, what a guy, you know, oh, we've all been there. Soon as the newspapers start going, this guy's a fucking pedo, this guy sticks his finger and other things up little boys' bumholes, people start going, whoa, fucking get rid of him. And, you know, rightly so, no one likes a pedo. A lot of the time it seems like even other pedos don't even like other pedos. Which, you know, maybe it's, I don't know what to say about that, but I mean, this isn't truth-seeking, I'm not going to go on about pedos, that's more of a truth-seeking thing, but listen to Truth Seeking as well. It's had its highest month of listens. Just to let you know, guys, Truth Seeking is on a Thursday night at 7 PM, also available on Spotify, Good Pods and Apple as well now. But, getting back to the pedo, by saying he's a dirty pedo, like a bunch of school kids in a playground, which ironically would be a really good source of information to find out if this guy was actually a pedo, but in the same way that the kids in a playground would go, you know, take the piss out of someone's dad, you know, or the mum are going, you could argue the newspaper's doing that to this alien abductee who doesn't, and they don't, the big they don't want the public to know about alien abductions in this sense, or knowing that this happened and this guy's obvious, you know, video and photographic evidence of said visitations. So they make everyone think he's a pedo. Now, I'm not saying he's not. He could be. But he could be both. He could be both a paedophile and an alien abductee. Him being a paedophile doesn't neglect from, what's the word? Negate from him being an alien abductee. And him being an alien abductee doesn't account for or negate the fact that he's a paedophile. The two aren't necessarily connected, and I'm not saying they are, but I'm saying that by saying this guy's a pedo, that makes everyone go, whoa, ignore the alien stuff, he's saying that so you don't think about that. But what if it's both? In the same way that people say about Jimmy Savile, oh, he wasn't a wizard, he was just a pedo. What if he was a pedo and a wizard? It's possible. Maybe unlikely, but still possible, and it just seems a way to try and move people's attention from one subject to another with a person. But it's also a difficult thing to deny, innit, being a pedo, because there aren't many pedos out there that are going to openly admit to fucking kids or fantasising about fucking kids. Most of them are going to tell you it's not true, or I didn't do that, you know, because it's such a fucking heinous crime and they know no one's going to like them. But you get a bit of a feeling that Stan might be telling the truth, because he didn't actually go to prison as such. He was put in what's called a halfway house and made to register as a sex offender, yeah, but he also missed all of his relevant court dates. Now, it's not said if he missed them because he was on a spaceship, I'm not overly sure. At least according to the paper, they say he missed his court dates, and because of that, they added an extra 10 years of so-called supervision to his sentence. Yet, later in the story, it suggested that he tried to talk about his alien encounters in court, but the solicitors wouldn't allow him, claiming it was irrelevant. Now, he's written a few books as well, and there's even been a film about him, so that means that, potentially, we could see an Epstein film in the future, because he was also a paedophile who managed to evade prison time. But in the Epstein film, we'll probably get a much higher quality of cameo in the castings, I would have thought, rather than just like Jim from down the shop. It'll be, you know, various celebrities can come in and be themselves. And I'm not going to say the names of this book or the names of the film about Big Stan, because you know, he's a pedo, and let's not advertise his books and have him making money from it. Now, most of his alien interactions were supposedly with the Greys, but initially, then I read about him. When I read about him, I saw that he was from a place called Loveland. Now, cryptid enthusiasts amongst you might be thinking, oh shit, was it anything to do with the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio? And unfortunately, mate, it's nothing to do with them, because this Loveland is in the state of Colorado. So apparently in America they have a lot of places of the same name. Maybe to just confuse things. Maybe it's so they can compare them and do experiments on these people. Who knows? Now, his first visit that he was aware of was in May 2009. But he doesn't remember making the baby itself. He doesn't remember getting his willy wet, basically. And but a couple of his children seem to have visited him since. One came to his window and managed to leave just a solitary footprint in the snow that continued to go on to repel the snow and eventually grew flowers. And then later in his life, he was at a UFO convention to give a talk, and a weird little girl came up to him and gave him flowers, saying, "Daddy, I love you." Saying, "Dad, I love you, Daddy," and ran away. Now, that's the only true face-to-face interaction, if you like, but there was another exchange that took place over the phone whilst he was talking to his mate called Heidi. I don't know what an alien would sound like.
"Daddy, don't worry, we're fine. It's too dangerous for us there right now. You couldn't protect us even if you wanted to. We didn't mean to interrupt your call, but we thought you should know there are 9 of us. 7 of the same."
Kind of like the 7 Sages of Hell.
"And 2, each one with different names. I am the oldest. I am named Kioma. It means Trinity. And Heidi, for you. My sister's name is Trilly. It means to shine. Daddy, we know you're excited about your talk this weekend, but please be careful. There are some that don't want you to talk at all."
Obviously, and he fades off into the distance like a fucking ghost, you know, and all at the same time. But if this is all true, and the stuff about Jimmy Savile being a wizard is true, then you've got to wonder what sort of weird stuff was happening with Jeffrey and Prince Andrew, and what connections they had to the occult or otherwise paranormal shenanigans. But that's all I've got time for this week, guys. I'll be back tomorrow, like I say, with Jimmy for Truth Seeking at 7 o'clock. And there's fucking loads of new stuff on my website, shirts and hats and that, just in time for Christmas. Fucking go and give them a look. I'll fucking see you in a bit, guys. Thanks for listening, man. If you enjoyed the show, you should probably go and try Truth Seeking. That's TROOF Seeking, as in like SEEKING, not like a fucking type of helicopter. But it's me and Jimmy Budd, a comedian from the UK. From England, like me. Don't know why I'm saying it like that. Either way, though, go and fucking have a listen. You can find one or two in the feed for this. There's the Crop Duster, but there should be, by the point you're listening to this, at least 15 episodes going out for Truth Seeking. So you might enjoy that, mate, and fucking leave a review on here and that. Leave a comment if you've watched it on YouTube. And if you do have YouTube as well, you can actually watch some of these. You can have them playing on a loop with my cartoon playing on a loop whilst you listen to 4 or 5 episodes of it. So, maybe throw that on at night time or something. Because that might help as well, because that might mean I can eventually monetize my YouTube. Anyway, fucking thanks for listening, man. I'll see you in a bit.